In October 2021, I decided to get myself my own VR headset. I've always been interested in virtual reality the moment I was given the opportunity to try it. Thanks bro. I've only dabbled in VR my first year of playing, but I want to express my thoughts on my first experiences. As you've already seen, I've done an Ancient Dungeon video, which still has shoddy editing, and I do intend to upload more, should the time come. With this being the first of many hopefully. In this video, I aim to try and explain my experiences so far, starting off with my Lenovo Explorer, my first proper VR headset. Now keep in mind, VR may not be for everyone, and it isn't. People still prefer their flat screen games, which is fine. But without further ado, let me talk about the first few games I played when I first got VR. Beat Saber needs no introduction, a rhythm game where you slash blocks to the music. Now for me, the vanilla soundtrack is lackluster. There are a few bangers like Rum and Bass, but I believe where the game truly shines is in its modifications and mods. Custom songs have always been a dream for any rhythm game, since the days of Guitar Hero. With so many tracks to download, you'll find your favourite tunes to groove into in no time. But nobody has done Moonlight Rendezvous by Beast in Black, so I'll wait until that happens. Depending on your taste, you could be playing metal, Eurobeat, dance, or even just some modern Britpop if you're really into that. For me, I believe metal is a good way to get some cardio done in Beat Saber. Blade and Sorcery is another classic you'll spend hours playing, with the freedom of releasing your inner psychopath or mere gladiators. There's a good choice of weapons in the vanilla, but once again, a game that has tons of mods, such as a Star Wars mod which completely converts stuff over into basically a Star Wars aesthetic, custom avatars, and even spells. And even if you're into anime, you'll find stuff like the Trials of Shinobi mod. Or, you can find Guts' greatsword and just start beating face! The first two games are great for single player. Blade and Sorcery can apply a good amount of stress relief if you're just having a bad day. And Beat Saber does help for doing cardio if you like to work out in a casual sense. But the Lenovo Explorer does have its own issues too, with its first being hardwired, being a PC VR headset only. The controllers are not the most comfortable compared to say something like the Quest 2, which I'll get to in another time. The grip buttons are also rather whack, as they are basically dip switches. The triggers can come loose too if you're a bit too rough with them like I was. I once had to open up the controller to reset the position of the right hand trigger in order to use it again. That is one thing I do like about the headset and its controllers. They aren't hard to modify. Hell, the way you can lift the headset by turning the hinge on it was great until its use wore out, so then I would have to get some adhesive hooks so that the headset would not move on its own. Now that I've ran my tangent on an Explorer a bit more, I'm going to tell you about 3 more VR games that really stood out to me. The first being Legendary Tales. Legendary Tales is a 4-player dungeon crawler with online co-op, which is something I truly adore. Being able to join up with friends and just go sprawling around dungeon was, and still is, great. Even though right now I can get stale with fighting just simple skeletons and goblins, the upcoming New World update will give players more to do and more to fight. But for me, combat and weapon handling here never felt so great. In my experiences, I've always preferred how Legendary Tales feels with its swords and weapons, unlike Blade and Sorcery, which sometimes feels clunky and weighty, which the weight is fine, but I digress. I simply enjoy drawing my giant castle breaker and then swinging that bad boy around until everything drops, or taking 2 swords and basically going ham. Even leveling up feels nice. Although it's nothing as significant as leveling up in a classic dungeon crawler, let's say for example Spiral Knights, it still feels nice to pick out the skills you want and then be able to survive a 5v1 situation. This can happen a lot in single player. I find the best thing to do is go sword and shield. There's nothing really quite like it. There's even damage scaling so that you have to watch how you swing. Hitting the opponent in a flurry will do reduced damage and may not even hit sometimes, whilst focusing your attacks will keep your numbers consistent. Think about how combat would work in World of Warcraft. You hit that auto attack button, you bonk the mob. Wait a second, do it again, but make sure you're parrying attacks in this game, and you won't have a problem. Ancient Dungeon recently dropped on the MetaQuest store. The game isn't fully complete yet, but for what you're paying for, you're gonna get addicted to this. You might just say to yourself, one more run, one more, and 2 hours later, you'll be sweating. The game holds up to even most modern VR games. Combat is simple, so go get your sword, your knife, if you're a Chad like me, and smack slimes in the face. Or if you're a loser, virgin crossbow user, but both weapons are good in their own right. I'm just a guy who likes to use the sword more than the crossbow. The game consists of 5 floors: the Overgrown Great House, the Infested Dungeon, the Forgotten Library, the Luminous Mines, and the Beast's Cradle. Get through them all and victory is yours, if you last that long. The game is essentially a roguelike, procedural generation, random items to help you on your run, etc, and even looping, which will also now segue us to my favourite roguelike. Compound is possibly the greatest VR roguelike I've played so far, and no disrespect to Ancient Dungeon, that game is great in its own right. But Compound does, for me, what most first-person shooters should let you do, physically avoiding fire. As my first proper VR FPS, yes, I've also played Pavlov, I'll get to that another time. Compound gives the player 16 weapons to play with, each being part of their own weapon type, red being shotguns, green being explosives, pink being high firepowers like a submachine gun and a revolver, and orange being energy-based weapons. There's even mutations to change how you play the game, my favourite being the people populator, taking on what would be impossible odds and managing to come out alive. There's even a completion list, most being simply kill X amount of enemies or die X amount of times, etc, etc, or beat game on X difficulty, X being the thing you need to do. All of this leads to the one thing any completionist would want: a minigun. At the time of writing this, I am sitting at 95% completion and intend to finish the journey. I should also mention this game is hard. Even with being able to physically move around enemy fire, it's not hard to get overwhelmed by not prioritizing targets. There's even mini bosses that show up in certain parts of levels. So be on your guard when playing on higher difficulties, because only a few mistakes will get you killed, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot. But with each run you'll improve, and you'll start to weave some near impossible bullet patterns. Overall, these 5 games should be ones you should try out if you're interested in VR. There's so much to check out, and only a few of these games will stand out to you. There's so many games and apps you can use in VR, and it's not just for gaming. There's things like Gravity Sketch, which lets you basically apply the tools of Blender in VR, and Noda, helping you put notes down if you're writing ideas and such. You also got social apps like VR Chat and Neos, and if you've been in the know, then you're aware of what happened with VR Chat, the whole easy anti-cheat thing. Whether you're simply interested in gaming or the VR tools that come out, it is a whole new world for people to check out. You don't need to join a metaverse or anything. You don't need to join a blockchain. You don't need to buy NFTs yet. You can just find the games or tools you want and have at it. I hope you've enjoyed this lackluster explanation of my VR experience so far. So, you know, like, comment, subscribe, bell, whatever. But yeah, that's about it. Later.